Okay, so this is the Bible study for Genesis chapter 24, verses 28 through 67. And the text says, "The young woman ran and told her mother's household about these things. Now Rebekah had a brother named Laban, and he hurried out to the man at the spring. As soon as he had seen the nose ring and bracelets on his sister's arms, and had heard Rebekah tell what the man said to her, he went out to the man and found him standing by the camels near the spring. 'Come, you who are blessed by the Lord,' he said. 'Why are you standing out here? I have prepared the house and a place for the camels.' So the man went to the house, and the camels were unloaded. Straw and fodder were brought for the camels, and water for him and his men to wash their feet. Then food was set before him. But he said, 'I will not eat until I have told you what I have to say.' 'Then tell us,' Laban said. So he said, 'I am Abraham's servant. The Lord has blessed my master abundantly, and he has become wealthy. He has given him sheep and cattle and silver and gold, male and female servants and camels and donkeys. My master's wife Sarah has borne him a son in her old age, and he has given him everything he owns. And my master made me swear on oath and said, you must go get a wife for my son from the daughters. You must not get a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites in whose land I live, but go to my father's family and to my own clan and get a wife for my son.' Then I asked my master, 'What if the woman will not come back with me?' He replied, 'Then the Lord, before whom I have walked faithfully, will send his angel with you and make your journey a success, so that you can get a wife for my son from my own clan and from my own father's family. You will be released from my oath if, when you go to the clan, they refuse to give her to you. Then you will be released from my oath. When I came to the spring today, I said, Lord God of my master Abraham, if you will, please grant success to the journey on which I have come. See, I am standing behind this spring. If a young woman comes out to draw water, and I say to her, please let me drink a little water from your jar, and if she says to me, drink, and I'll draw water for your camels too, let her be the one the Lord has chosen for my master's son.' Before I finished praying in my heart, Rebekah came out with her jar on her shoulder. She went down to the spring and drew water, and I said to her, please give me a drink. She quickly lowered her jar from her shoulder and said, drink, and I'll water your camels too. So I drank, and she watered the camels also. I asked, whose daughter are you? She said, the daughter of Bethuel, son of Nahor, whom Milcah bore to him. Then I put the ring in her nose and the bracelets on her arm. I bowed down and worshipped the Lord and praised the Lord, and the God of my master Abraham, who had led me on the right road to get the granddaughter of my master's brother for his son. Now, if you will show kindness and faithfulness to my master, tell me, and if not, tell me, so I may know which way to turn. Laban and Bethuel answered, this is from the Lord. We can say nothing to you one way or the other. Here is Rebekah, take her and go, and let her become the wife of your master's son, as the Lord has directed. When Abraham's servant heard what they said, he bowed down to the ground before the Lord. Then the servant brought out gold and silver jewelry and articles of clothing and gave them to Rebekah. He also gave costly gifts to her brother and to her mother. Then he and the men who were with him ate and drank and spent the night there. When they got up the next morning, he said, send me on my way to my master. But her brother and mother replied, let the woman remain with us 10 days or so, then you may go. But he said to them, do not detain me, now that the Lord has granted success to my journey. Send me on my way, so that I may go to my master. Then they said, let's call the young woman and ask her about it. So they called Rebekah and asked her, will you go with this man? I will go, she said. So they sent their sister Rebekah on her way, along with her nurse and Abraham's servant and his men. And they blessed Rebekah and said to her, our sister, may you increase to thousands upon thousands. May your offspring possess the cities of their enemies. Then Rebekah and her attendants got ready and mounted the camels and went back with the man. So the servant took Rebekah and left. Now Isaac had come from Beer Lahai Roi, for he was living in the Negev. He went out to the field one evening to meditate, and as he looked up, he saw camels approaching. Rebekah also looked up and saw Isaac. She got down from her camel and asked the servant, "Who is the man in the field coming to meet us?" "He is my master," the servant answered. So she took her veil and covered herself. Then the servant told Isaac all he had done. Isaac brought her to the tent of his mother Sarah, and he married Rebekah. So she became his wife, and he loved her, and Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. So number one says, what happened in last week's Bible study in the first part of Genesis 24. Oh, remember that you can download a PDF copy of this Bible study at www.abqnaz.org/alive so that you can follow along with us. All we have to do is read this week because they tell the story again. And they kind of tell this story 3 times in this chapter, it seems like. B, a lot. We read parts of 3 chapters. Sarah died, and Abraham acquired land to bury her. Abraham's family and kids, meanwhile, and had kids, meanwhile, and Abraham sent his servant to get a wife for Isaac from his own family. All that's true, and that sets us up. C, the servant was not allowed to get a wife from the Canaanites, nor was he to take Isaac back to the land of their family. That's true. D, the angel went before the servant. He prayed, and his prayer was answered. The woman who fulfilled all of his requests appeared before him and did all that he had said. That's true. E, the servant asked if they could stay at her father's house for the night, and she agreed. All that's true. Number 2, what is happening now according to 24:28-33? A, the young woman ran and told her mother's household about these things. Yes. B, Rebekah had a brother, and he ran out to meet the man at the spring. He saw the bracelets on his sister's arms, so is he about to fight this guy? And I think in our modern culture, if some random guy met our sister down at the well somewhere, gave her a bunch of jewelry, we'd want to know what in the world was going on, and we might go out ready to throw hands. So we kind of, my first time reading this text, that's kind of where I thought this was going. He ran out. Her brother saw the bracelets. He's like, what is going on? What's happening? What are these guys doing to my sister? And he ran down there. But that's not exactly how it goes when he gets down there. C says he asked the man why he was standing out there when the house had been prepared for their arrival. So in other words, he was much more welcoming than most of us would have been, perhaps if some random guy at the well had given a bunch of gifts to our sister. D, the man went to the house, the camels were fed, his feet were washed, and dinner was ready, and that's true. And then, of course, we kind of skipped over this a little bit, but he wasn't going to, dinner was ready, but he wasn't going to eat until he had told his story. So number 3 says, what did the servant tell them in 34 through 48? A, pretty much everything. B, he caught them up on Abraham's situation. So he told the whole story that we've already read when it happened, that he had already prayed for it to happen, then we read when it happened, and now he's telling about how it happened. He did catch them up on Abraham's situation. So, hey, Abraham left a long time ago. You probably don't even know where he is, but this is what's going on with Abraham. And he's become wealthy and influential, and God has blessed him. C, he told them about the oath, and that's true. And then D, he told them about his prayer and how God answered it with Rebecca. So that was part of the pretty much everything. I prayed, the angel went before me, and he tells them that. That was a key part of the story that he doesn't leave out. The angel did go before me, and when I prayed, I opened my eyes. There's Rebecca. She did exactly what I prayed. I said, if this person, if I ask for water and she gives water to the camels too and offers that, this is the one. And God answered that prayer through Rebecca. So he tells them that. Number four, what does he say in 49? So he kind of gives them an ultimatum. He says, "Now, if you will show kindness and faithfulness to my master, tell me, and if not, tell me, so I may know which way to turn." So he doesn't assume that they're like sold by his, on his story. He says, "Okay, now that you know all that, we haven't eaten, we haven't taken anything from you. If you're ready to be kind to my master and follow through with this, then let me know so I know what I need to do right now. Because honestly, if if I haven't found the right person, then I need to go out and look again or something." Um, so number five, how did Laban and Bethuel answer in 50 and 51? Laban is the brother of Rebekah. Bethuel is the father of Rebekah. A, we're not sending our sister and daughter out into the wilderness with some stranger, which is how most of us would have probably responded. B, this is all from the Lord. So they heard the story and said, but A is not the answer, by the way. B is the answer. This is all from the Lord. That's what they said. C, take her and go and let her become the wife of your master's son, as the Lord has directed. So they're sold on the story. They believe that God is in this. They heard what they heard, and they believe that God has this as a part of His plan. And so they sort of give permission for this servant to take her. Number six, what did the servant do next, according to 52 through 54? A, he bowed down to praise the Lord. Again, he's praising the Lord. So he praised the Lord when God answered his prayer and everything happened just as he had prayed. Now he's praising the Lord again, that they're saying, yes, you've indeed succeeded on your journey. She's going to go with you. And then B, he brought out more jewelry for Rebecca and gifts for her brother and mother. So, sort of the bracelets and the nose ring. I looked that up a little bit, and that meant something to them. It was, at very least, a demonstration of the wealth that Abraham had and was able to provide when it came to a dowry. It showed that there was validity to this story, but certainly it would have been the beginning of the process of showing that she belonged to somebody. I didn't read that a nose ring or bracelets were uh, I didn't read in any commentary that said that they were sort of the equivalent of the wedding ring. That's kind of what I was wondering. Is this something where once this has happened, there's some commitment? But it doesn't sound like that was the case at that point. But it was sort of a demonstration of what could be. It was, this guy really is rich, if that matters. He can pay the family. God really has blessed him, and what I'm telling you is all true. Then he ate. I didn't get this to my. I've been behind, and my editor hasn't been getting this from me. So he ate, spent the night, and woke up ready to go. So when he woke up in the morning, um, he said, "Okay, here we go. We're ready to go." And number seven says, what happened when he was ready to go according to 55? But her brother and mother replied, let the young woman remain with us 10 days or so, then you may go. And so I have um, there's a footnote in my version that says over you that says she. So it's unclear whether they were saying then she may go, or whether the understanding was that she would go with him and he would stay for that 10 days or so too. But it does, for me, maybe I'm not trusting, I'm not in the midst of that culture, I'm in this modern culture, and it really seems to me a little sus that he breaks out all the wealth, gives gifts to everybody, and then they're like, I'll tell you what, um, she's not going to go today. We're going to keep her for another 10 days. She'll meet you there. No, 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 no. That's not how we're going to do this. And so I don't know. It's a little bit less suspicious um, if he was going to wait with her, which probably they wouldn't have sent her out traveling that distance alone. So maybe that is what was meant there. But the night before, they're like, "Yeah, take her and go." And then he wakes up the next morning. He's like, "Okay, let's go." And they're like, "Yeah, maybe 10 days or so, and then she can go." And um, so, how did the servant respond according to 56? Do not detain me. Now that the Lord has granted success to my journey, send me on my way so I may go to my master. So he says, don't hold me up. Don't, no, we need to go now. God is in this. You agreed to that. And so we need to get back and complete the deal here. And then how did they settle this according to 57 and 58? It says, let's call the young woman and ask her about it. So they called Rebecca and asked her, will you go with this man? I will go, she said. So ultimately, it was her decision. It's interesting. They didn't say, will you go with this man now or 10 days from now? They asked her, will you go with this man? Which almost makes it sound like what I thought the first time I read it, and that is that it wasn't as settled as they had indicated the night before, and that maybe they were trying to hold on to her. Um, but ultimately, Rebecca is the one that made the decision that she would go. Number 8, what happened in 59 through 67? So this is sort of the culmination of the story after they left. A, they sent Rebecca on her way. Yes. B, Isaac came out from Bir Lahai Roy out to the field one evening to meditate, and as he looked up, he saw the camels approaching. So he was living out in the wilderness, apparently. He came back. We don't know why he came back to this area, probably where Abraham was. Perhaps he came back because Abraham had died at this point. It really felt like when the servant made the commitment, it said Abraham was old. It really felt like maybe this was sort of a dying request, and that this journey took long enough that maybe Abraham has now died in the meantime. Sort of the way that it felt was that Abraham was making him promise something that, he said, what happens if she doesn't come back? It's almost as if Abraham's not going to be there to clarify what happens if she doesn't come back. So, sort of the way I interpreted this and took this is that Abraham was on his deathbed when this commitment was made. The servant traveled, and when he came back, Isaac was his master because Abraham was no longer living. And so perhaps Isaac, who had been away, sort of living on his own, developing his own crops or herd or whatever, um, his father passed away and he came back because now everything that belonged to his father was his, and it was his to manage. And now he's out in the field meditating one day. And he doesn't say praying, which is interesting, but it feels like the assumption is that he's thinking, but perhaps talking to the God of his father Abraham. Um, in this, about what's going on. C, Rebecca also looked up and saw Isaac and got down from her camel. Yes. D, Rebecca asked who the man was and covered herself with a veil when she learned who he was. So she's been traveling, maybe not as careful around the servant and his men, um, about covering herself, but when she realizes sort of this is the one that she's to marry, she covers herself. Modesty, what's appropriate here. And then Isaac took her into the tent and married her. Now, it says into the tent of his mother. When I first read that, I was like, wait. I thought Sarah died, and I thought, he was going to like ask Sarah for permission. And did we flip flop? Did we switch around? In the order of things, but after sort of reading it and thinking through it and studying it, I think no, Sarah actually was gone, but it was like his mother's house, and taking her into his mother's um, you know, I want to be careful how I say this because basically there's no priest per se. There's no organized religion at that point. There's Abraham and then Isaac and their relationship with God, directly with God. Um, and so, our understanding of marriage is go before the pastor and make a commitment in front of the church, in front of God and these witnesses that's administered by a pastor. If you're in sort of secular society and not in the church, you might do it before a judge. But that's sort of our way of doing things today. But the reality is that when they came together and became one flesh, in his mother's tent, they were from that day forward married. Now, I want to be careful because somebody's going to say, well, see, the church has been trying to convince us to get married. We've been living together for a while, and the church says we're living in sin. But isn't that what Isaac did? He just went into the tent, lay with her, and he was married to her, and that's what we did too. Well, that would be a much more convincing argument if there was a higher level of commitment. Um, and the fact that when somebody says you should take an oath, you should commit to, say vows before God and these witnesses. When somebody doesn't want to take, it's not complex to have a wedding. When somebody doesn't want to do that, I have a question about their commitment level. I have my thinking is that they're worried about doing that in front of witnesses because then if they break it, they have witnesses that said they committed to it and now they're broken it. Or if it's official in all the paperwork, it's so much harder to unentangle, and now everything we own is ours and not just mine, and so now if something happens, we have to disentangle it, and so that's why we're staying separate. And see, to me, those excuses are proof that you're not really committed. Whereas I would say in Isaac's day and in that time and in that custom, there was a commitment inherent to the responsibility of lying with somebody. And I'll just say this, that people have a tendency to lie down with people all the time in the biblical sense and not take responsibility for what happens. And so there is not in our culture a responsibility that's inherent to that. And so I would say that we don't live in a culture where that the responsibility of that act is understood the way it was in that day, and therefore We need some commitments. Um, and honestly, if you're not willing to, if you know, if you're not willing to wait till you've made a commitment and made that official to lie down with her, then my thinking is that that's what you're about anyway, is the instant gratification. And when that instant gratification isn't there, you're going to go back on any oath you probably would have made anyway. And so to me, just the willingness to go through the process demonstrates that you're in it for the long term instead of for the short term pleasure. You're in it for the long term good instead of the short term. And we're going to keep talking about that concept because in chapter 25, we get to thinking about like short term thinking versus long term good. Um, so I will say that I've performed African weddings since our church has done a lot of work with Congolese refugees and Sudanese refugees and others, and I was told by one family they wanted to do an American wedding, but the pastor asked, "Can you come pray for the bride and the groom?" And I said, "Now, Pastor, do you want me to pray for them, or do you want me to perform the wedding?" And he said, "In our culture, it's the same thing." That they don't go through this and that and this. The primary, sort of the core of the wedding ceremony is praying for them and their union. And so I would say that, um, you know, I'm not sure that it is about what the ceremony looks like as much as it is about those principles that God comes first and we're willing to make a commitment before God and we're thinking seriously about the commitment that is being made. And we understand that with the physical pleasure that goes along with the things that come with marriage, that there's a responsibility to one another that is primary, and those things come along with the responsibility and the commitment, and the fact that that needs to be understood, and whatever sort of process we've got to go through, so that the couple understands that that's what marriage is. It's long-term commitment, a decision to put the other person first, not just pursuing my own short-term pleasure. That's the key. That's the point. And I don't know how to prove that they had the long term in mind other than just to say that let's keep reading and let's see that this was no short term one night stand type of deal. Um, and that's key. And sort of he's taking on the role of his father as master of his household. He goes into his family home and brings his new wife there, and they consummate the marriage. And so that's the key there. And God was in this thing from the beginning. Abraham, the oath that he made the servant swear, was according to God's call on Abraham to begin with. The angel went before, the servant prayed, God provided, they came back, and all of this was according to the will of God. And by the way, if we started there, let's even forget focusing on the marriage ceremony. Let's start there. That even the choosing of the spouse was what God was put first in the process. And I can just say that a lot of people um, that's not how things are done, and that's not how they go through the process. And that's not a recipe for success. We need God first and foremost and throughout.